Hello everyone, welcome to my kitchen. My name is Michael and let's make some sourdough bread. We're going to take our sourdough starter and I've got it right here. If you haven't seen my video on how to make my sourdough starter, I'll put that link in that description box below so you can go check that out and get your sourdough starter out and ready to go. So if you've had your sourdough starter in the refrigerator like I have, you want to bring it out and just let it sit at room temperature for a couple hours and let it kind of reacclimate itself to the outside air again, because we're going to take it and we're going to turn your starter into your levain for your sourdough. So I'll put the word here on the screen of what that is. That's what we're going to do is take the starter and we're going to actually ferment it now to make our levain for our sourdough. So I'm going to take my starter that I've got here and I'm going to take it and I'm going to put it into a bowl. You can see that I've got a really nice healthy starter. I'll show you that. We've got some nice bubbles on that. And we've got a really nice smell. So I've got a clean bowl here and we're going to dump every bit of this out into this bowl. So with your starter, you want to check your recipe to see how much you're going to need, because we're going to need to make at least that much plus a little bit more, because you want to be able to have some left back so that you can keep your starter going. So this recipe requires 190 grams of our levain. So I'm going to make 200 and that'll give me 10 grams left, and that way I'll have some starter left over to be able to continue my batch that I've got. So I'm going to set my scales here and we're going to be measuring this in grams because we get more of an accurate measurement with that. So I've got that set on my grams on that. So we're going to take our starter and I'm going to put 100 grams back into this. And before I do that, I want to make sure that I get my scale back to 0. So we'll tare it. It comes back to 0. Now we can put our 100 grams. All right, I've got my scale here with my 100 grams of my starter in it, and I've got some left over here. I'm going to put this into another container and put that back in my refrigerator. I'll give it a little feeding and we'll have it ready to go for the next one. So you can definitely, if you want to use this, if you've got a lot of this left over, you can make some nice pancakes with these, sourdough pancakes. You can make some little bread if you want to put this on in a skillet and fry it up with some everything, the bagel seasoning on the top of it. You could definitely do that. You don't have to throw this out, but I'm going to put this into another container, give it a little bit of a feeding, and save it for my next batch of my sourdough. All right, so I've got my 100 grams of my sourdough in here, and then I'm going to take 50 grams of my unbleached all-purpose flour, and we're going to put that in next. All right, so I got me a spoon here. Let's put this back down to 0. We'll tear that back out, and we'll add 50 grams of our flour. All right, I've got 50 grams of my unbleached flour here. Now we're going to take 50 grams of my whole wheat flour and we'll put that in. All right, I've got my spoon cleaned off now, and I'm going to put 50 grams of my whole wheat flour in now to bring it up to 100. All right, I'm at 100 grams now of my flour, so I'm going to set that to the side, and now we're going to grab our water and make sure we're using filtered, dechlorinated water, and we're going to put 100 grams of water into our container. I'm going to wipe off this spoon and we'll use the same one. I'm going to tear this back down to 0. And we'll put in our 100 grams of our water. All right, I've got my 100 grams of my water now. Then I'm going to take my spatula over here and we're going to give this a good mix through. All right, now that I've got it all mixed together now, I'm going to clean the lid off of it before I put it away. But we want this to ferment for about 5 or 6 hours. So I'm going to put this back someplace warm and let it ferment, and then we'll come back and move on to the next step. Stick with me. I am back, and let's get ready to move on to our next step now. So we've got our levain, and we've already fed it, and it has been sitting for a while. Like I said earlier, you can either put it on overnight or you can do it about 5 or 6 hours before. So if you're timing it and you're about an hour before that time runs out on that levain, we can go ahead and get started on our next phase. So I'm going to go ahead and get my kitchen scale out, and we're going to be measuring in grams again. And we're going to be measuring our flour. So with our flour, you can use all bread flour if that's what you like, or you can use a combination of wheat and rye. It's whatever you want to do. If you don't have the wheat or the rye, then you can use all bread flour. It's completely up to you. I had to actually order my rye offline because I couldn't find it in the stores anywhere. So let's get started. I'm going to go ahead and put my bread flour in And I've got 758 grams of bread flour that I'll be adding to my bowl. And I want to make sure that I get that zeroed out. All right, now that I've got my 758 grams of my bread flour in, I'm going to zero my scale back, and we're going to put in 120 grams of my whole wheat flour. All right, now that we've got our whole wheat flour in, we're going to get our rye flour, and we're going to zero my scale back. So our rye flour is going to give us just a little bit more flavor, and we're going to add 60 grams. All right, now that we've got our rye flour in, I'm going to move my scale out of the way, and I'm just going to give this a whisk together, kind of get this all whisked together. All right, now that we've got that all whisked together, let's go ahead and start working on our water. So I've got 603 grams of water that I've got here, and I've got another 50 that I've got held back. Now, this is the part that we want to really watch now, because depending on if you're in a really humid area, you might not have to use as much water because your flour might have a lot of moisture in it. If you're in a really dry area, you might a little bit more. But we're going to take a look at this as we go and see what we're going to do. So I'm going to start out with 500 grams here, or about 500 milliliters of water, and I'm going to put that into my bowl here. And I'm just going to use my clean hand, and I'm just going to go in and start mixing that together. With sourdough, this is just a lot different than just using the yeast that you get in the store. This is more hands-on. It's more of a tactile feel to it. It's not the mix together and go, let it rise, and then put it in the oven. This takes a little bit more of a learning curve to learn about this, but it's not hard once you do it. So if you just kind of follow along with this, and we're going to see what this is going to turn out. So this is still dry. So I've got my other water here. I'm going to put just a little bit more in. And we'll give that a turn over and see where we're at with it. We want it to look kind of wet and sticky looking. And I can then tell that this is not going to be enough water. So let's go ahead and add the rest of our water in. And I might have to grab just a little bit more out of my other reserve too. Let's take a look at it and see. At this phase, all we're doing now is just working the water into the flour to start letting the flour absorb some of that moisture in there. All right, I went and got me a little bit of water here, and you can do that instead of putting in any more. You can just take it and wet your hand, and that way it kind of gives it a little bit without adding a lot more to it. And we've got a good mixture on this now. And you can see that this is a really, all the flour has come off my hands now, and everything has got a good mix together. I'm just going to form this into a ball now into the bottom of this bowl. Just kind of turn it in on itself to get a ball. I'm going to go ahead and get my other hand in there. All right, we've been at this for a couple of minutes now, and we've got our dough into a ball. You can see that it is still sticky. Everything has come off my hands, so it did get well incorporated into it. Now I'm going to put a cover over it, and I'm going to let this sit for an hour. While we're waiting for that, it should be about the time that we get ready for our levain to be ready. Set your timer for an hour, and we'll come back and we'll move on to the next step. Stick with me. I am back. It's been 1 hour now, and let's take a look at our dough and see what it has done. So we don't have any of our levain in it yet, so it's just been where we've got the flour and the water in it. Now we're going to go ahead and start our fermentation process. So for this, I put it in the oven and turn the light on just to kind of keep it warm. And we want the temperature to be between 76 and 78 degrees Fahrenheit. So when I pulled it out, we checked on it, and it's now 79. So it's a little warmer than where I'd like to be at. You can control that if it's a little bit cooler in your kitchen by heating up your water just a little bit to kind of get it into that range. I've had the water sitting out here on the counter, so it's probably going to cool this down just a bit. All right, so now what we're going to do is we're going to add 18 grams of salt. And with any fermentation, if you've seen any of my other videos, with anything with fermentation, the only ingredient that you want in your salt is salt. So I'll be using my pickling and canning salt today. So if you look at the ingredients on the side and you see anything on the ingredient list other than salt, don't use that, because this is a fermentation and it could mess that up or slow it down. And we definitely don't want to do that. As much time as you spent into the process of making your sourdough starter, only to have it ruined by having something in the salt that might slow it down. So what we're going to do is just going to add that across the top of it, just like that. Kind of sprinkle it around. And now we've got our levain here that we've got, and you can see what mine has done. It's doubled in size on that. So that's where you kind of want to be with that. So I'm going to put mine on my scale here, and I'm going to zero that down. And I want 190 grams of my levain here. We can take a look at that and see we've got nice bubbles on that. We've got that nice a sourdough smell to it that we like to smell with that, so that starter. So we've got a lot of good activity, so I know this is going to be really good. I've got my scale set at 0 now, and let's add 190 grams in. All right, I've got 190 grams on my scale here, so I'm going to take the rest of that and put that back. So you can see why I made just a little bit more of the starter. That way we can go ahead and give this a feed, put it back in the refrigerator, and have it ready for your next sourdough project. So now we've got our water that we've held back just a little bit of that. So we're going to take our clean hand and we want to wet our hands just a little bit with that. And we're going to put just a little bit on the top of it to kind of dissolve some of that salt in. We're not going to put all of it in there. And then we're going to take my other hand that I've got here, and I've got another bowl of water here. And we're just going to take, and I'm going to mix this together now with this. I'll move my scale out of the way. With the moisture that was in your levain, you definitely don't want to put all of that water in there yet, because it could be a little bit too much for it. So like I say, every event is going to be a little bit different. Your home could be a lot more humid. You could be living in a drier area where you might need that extra water. So we're going to work on this for 2 or 3 minutes to get that all incorporated so we can start that fermentation process. All right, I've got everything mixed together now, and you can see what this is looking like. It's still a little sticky, and that's where it needs to be. We're trying to develop that gluten at this point. So now that we've got everything in there, our fermentation process starts. All right, now that I've got this all mixed together, I'm going to put this back in my oven with the light on, and that way it keeps a little bit warmer in there. The warmer this is going to be, the less time you'll need for your fermentation process. So I'm going to be looking at about 4 hours today on this. And if your home is a little bit cooler, it might take a little bit longer for this process to happen. So I'm going to put my cap back on it. I'll put it in the oven, and I'll see you in 30 minutes for our first set of stretch and folds. Stick with me. All right, it has been 30 minutes, and now we're ready for our first stretch and fold. You might have also heard of the term a slap and fold. That's something else you can do where you pick it up in the middle and slap it on the counter and then fold it over. So I do a stretch and fold on this. So I've got my dough here, and we can see that it's coming along nicely. It's not where it needs to be yet. We're going to take and wet your hands, and you're going to take and you're going to raise the dough up on one side and just raise it straight up and then fold it back in on top of itself. We'll turn it completely around. Wet your hands again. We want to make sure we keep them wet. Reach down under the dough, pick it up, stretch it up as high as it will go, fold it back over again. We'll turn it 90 degrees, wet your hands again, stick them under the dough, raise it all the way up as high as it'll go, turn it down, and we'll do one more. Wet your hands again, raise the dough up, see if we can get it to stretch any at all. All right, so you notice probably the fourth one there got a little tight on that as we were pulling it through, but go ahead and give it a pull anyway. We want to make sure we're building that gluten in that dough and building it up. It's a little bit different than how you do just regular yeast that you get in the packages. It's not going to develop like that where you just let it rest and it does its own thing. This, you have to actually build the gluten up in it. So that was the first one of 4. We're going to let it rest for another 30 minutes. I'm going to put my cap back on it, put it back in my warm place, and I'll see you for step 2. Stick with me. We're back now for our second stretch and fold, and let's take a look at our dough and see what we've got. It looks like it is coming along nicely. We're getting a nice little shiny coating on the top of it there. So we want to take our hands, I got me some fresh water here, and we want to go in there and do the same thing. Just kind of raise up the side on one sides of it, give it a pull and lift it up and put it down. Turn it around, do the same thing on the other side. Turn the bowl 90 degrees, raise it for your third time. It's getting a little tighter to try to pull. And then our last time here, we'll pull and just kind of give it a little shape in the bowl there. We'll put our cap back on it, we'll put it back in our warm place, and we'll come back 30 minutes later for number 3. Stick with me. We're ready now for our third stretch and fold, so let's take a look at our dough and see where we're at. It's still coming along nicely. That is looking really good. So we're going to take our hands and we're going to wet them again. We're going to come in and do the same thing. Lift, fold it over, lift for your second time, 90 degrees for your third time, and the last one. I felt some air bubbles on that one, so we are getting some nice fermentation on that. So let's just put this back down into the bowl where it is. We'll put our cap back on it. We'll put it back into our warm spot, and we'll see you at round 4. Stick with me. All right, we are ready for our last stretch and fold. This is number 4. So let's take a look at our dough and see what we've got. It is coming along nicely. I see some nice air pockets in there. There's a bubble right here. So I know we've got some good active yeast that we've developed here in our sourdough from our starter that we've got going on. So let's take our hands and we're going to wet those one more time. Make sure we get those nice and wet. And again, come under it just like we've been doing in the other 3 and give it a nice pull up, stretch, building up that gluten in that. And then come up on the other side, do the same thing, stretch it up as hard as it'll go, fold it over, come in for stretch number 3. And finally, the last one. That one's not going to let me do too much to that one, so that's okay. We got some good stretches out of that. We're just going to kind of give this a little bit of a shape. I don't want to do too much to it because we're trying to get this to come up. All right, so we've got our 4th one done now. That is the last stretch and fold that we'll do on our bulk fermentation. So now I'm going to set a 2-hour timer, and we're going to finish out the 4 hours that we started with this originally and let this bulk fermentation do its job. So I'm going to take my cap I've got here. I'm going to put it back on the top. I'm going to put it back in my nice warm place, set that timer, and I'll see you back in 2 hours, and we'll move on to the next step. Stick with me. I am back, and I wanted to show you what my dough looks like now, what it has risen to. As you can see, it has done a lot of rising over that last time frame. So I did let this sit in here an extra hour on top of the additional 2 that I had asked for. So instead of the beginning 4, it's been in here for 5 hours. And you can see how much it has risen here. So now we need to move on to the next step, and now we need to get ready for our proofing. So this does make 2 loaves, so we're going to get this out of this bowl very easily, and I'll put it on my counter here, and I'm going to eyeball it, and we're going to cut it in 2 pieces so that I can get 2 loaves out of it. If you want to weigh it, you definitely can. Get your kitchen scales out and you can weigh it, but you can look and see the dough. You can tell that we've got a nice jiggle to it, so we've got a lot of air in it. We can see some bubbles here on the top. This looks really good, and let's give it a smell before we take it out. This is going to be really good bread, I can already tell. All right, so I've got some flour here. I'm not going to put any down on my countertop. I normally don't. So all right, so I've got a scraper here, and I'm going to run it along the side so that I can get it out of here without deflating this. I'm just going to run it around the edge. And I've got my little blue one there too if I decide I want to do that. But I just want to kind of break it around the edge where it's attached to the bowl. You can always check on your dough when you put it into this pan for this proofing, and if it hasn't doubled in size, just leave it in there a little bit longer until it doubles in size. It's not going to hurt it to do that at this point. All right, now we're going to take this. I'm going to get this out. All right, we've got that out of our bowl now, and you can see what this looks like. Got some really nice dough here, and I'm just going to kind of get it into a position. I've got my clean hands here, and I'm just going to cut it. And I think I'm going to cut it this way, how it kind of fell there. And I think I'm going to put just a little bit of flour on my cutter here, just to make sure that it's not going to stick to it when I pull it through. All right, so I've got my dough cut in two now. I'm just going to take the scraper here, and I'm just going to kind of shape it around without trying to disturb it too much. I'm going to give it a little bit more flour on that because it's wanting to stick. All right, and then I'm going to move this one. I'm going to try to move it into this area over here because we're going to let this sit again and kind of rise up a little bit. I'm going to kind of form it into a ball and just kind of twist it around until we can get it into that shape. Grab just a little bit more flour. All right, so we've got our dough out of our bowl now, and we've got it cut in two and kind of been rough shaped balls here. I've got these flour sack towels, and I'm going to put those over the top of it, and we want this to relax for about 30 minutes. And I'm just going to put that just like this. If you've got a really big draft or it's really cold in your room, you could put a couple of these. You could turn these bowls upside down on them and let them sit like that. But I've got this fairly warm in the kitchen where I'm at now. So I'm just going to let this sit here for 30 minutes. And when we come back, I'll get my bannetons ready and we'll get ready to start our proofing. Stick with me. I am back. It's been just a little over 30 minutes now, and I'm ready to remove my bread from the cutting board here, and we're going to get ready to put that into our bannetons for our proofing that we'll be doing overnight. So I've got my bannetons here, and I just keep them in these little plastic bags because once you season them, you can just put them away and store them this way. So the bannetons, once you get these, you can season them just by washing this cloth that comes with it, and you don't have to use a cloth if you want to. If you've seen some sourdoughs where you see the little ridges on the top of it, you can use that. Just put you some rice flour in the top of that. Rice flour is really good because it's supposed to help release better than regular flour does. So I've always used the rice flour with that. And so I just get it in these little bags here. It's just white rice flour. And you just take it with one of the little sifters and just kind of go around and just kind of sprinkle it around a little bit there. And then once you get it in there, you can move it around a little bit up on the sides, and that will keep it from sticking to the sides once you get your bread put into your banneton. And I'll do the other one the same way. All right, I went on and did my second banneton there, so we're now ready to go with those. And I'm going to go ahead and put a little bit of flour on my bench scraper here and put just a little bit on my hands. Now with this, we're going to get these ready, and I'm going to turn this over onto the table here. And we're going to give this a pull. There's a couple ways you can do this. You can pull it apart like this and pull the four sides into the middle. And I'll show you the other way in just a second also. Just pull it in like that. Kind of give it a little bit of a stretch. And then you can pull these four corners here into the middle like that. Just kind of give it a little stretch in. And do the same thing with that one. And then do that. And then once you've done that, just roll it over and just kind of force it into a ball like that. All right, and then once you get it like that, you can take it. I'm going to bring my banneton over here. Take it, pull it over, and we're going to turn it upside down. And we want the smooth side to be on the bottom. So we've got this here on the top. So you can also, if you want to, just kind of give it a few little pulls over if you want to, just to kind of give it a little bit more of a connect on that. Don't want to have to be real rough with it, because this isn't going to be seen anyway. So we're going to put that just like that. And then we'll take one of our little bonnets here, and we'll take it and we'll put it right over the top of it. And we're going to put this in the refrigerator. So I'm going to go ahead and do the same one here. We'll do the same thing, and I'll show you the different way to do that. So what you'll do is you'll get your scraper just like we did before. We'll pick it up. We'll turn it over. And then this one, we're just going to kind of just pull it in like different quadrants of it, and just kind of pull it in on itself, and just keep pulling it in. And then any place you see that you want to pull in, just do it that way until you kind of get it into a circle, and just keep pulling it in like that. So same kind of effect. It just kind of gives you a little bit nicer shape that way than the other way does. I've got my banneton here ready to go, and I'm going to put my blade under it just like that. I'll pick it up with my hands, and I'm going to put this in here just like that, and that's ready to go. I'm going to let this come down just a little bit more there. And if you want to, you can definitely, crisscross it here on the top to get it tied up a little bit more. Completely up to you, and just give it a little pinch. Get your bonnet out and put it on. So now these are ready for the refrigerator. We're going to proof these in the refrigerator overnight. So they'll be in there between 12 and 14 hours. And if you want to, you can kind of loosen this up a little bit, because they're going to rise a little bit while they're in there. They're not going to rise as fast because it's going to be cooler in your refrigerator than here on the counter. If you don't have time to do that in the refrigerator, you can definitely do it on the countertop. It'll just take maybe an hour and a half to 2 hours to let that rise. The reason that we're putting it in the refrigerator and letting it slow proof like that is we're developing that sour taste that we like when we have our sourdough. And that will develop a little bit stronger as longer you leave it in there. and it'll also proof it just as well. So definitely it's going to give it a little bit more structure, and it's going to give it that nice sour taste that we're looking for when we make our sourdough. So these are ready to go in, and we will see you back when it is time to bake these. Stick with me. All right, we're ready now to start baking our bread, and I'm going to go ahead and heat my oven up with my Dutch oven in it cold. And you can see here that it is empty, and I'm going to put that on 450 degrees, and I'm going to let that oven come up to temperature for about 30 minutes, maybe 45 minutes. We'll see when the light comes off of it, but definitely go ahead and put that into the oven now, and when we come back, we'll check on our dough to see if it is ready to go. Stick with me. All right, now that we've got our Dutch oven in the oven that is heating up to 450 degrees, it will take a little while to do that, so I wanted to take a look at the bread. And I knew when I cut this yesterday that one of them was going to be a little bit bigger than the other one, and I can see that we did get that out of it. So we've got some good rise on both of these. Our proofing looks really good, and so what you want to do is if you push in on it and it comes back just a little bit, then you know that you've got a good rise, and then that will eventually come up back on it also. We know this is proofed and ready to go. So I'm going to put this one back in the refrigerator, and I'm going to go ahead and cook this one. So I'll stick this back in, and we'll go on to the steps to get ready for this. So when the Dutch oven gets hot, it'll be ready to go. Stick with me. All right, so now let's prep our dough for the oven. So I've got another Dutch oven here that I just wanted to show you what that looked like. And I've got a piece of parchment paper, and I'll bring this up here to show you what's going to happen. So we're going to prep our dough here in just a minute, but we're going to put it on some parchment paper, and then the parchment paper is going to hold the dough down into inside the Dutch oven. So I'm going to crinkle this up just a little bit. And by doing that, that's going to make that fit down inside of that a lot easier than if you didn't do that step before. So now that we know what kind of shape we've got there, you can kind of take a look and see that's the bottom of where the Dutch oven is going to be. All right, so now that we kind of know what general shape we've got for our parchment paper here, we're going to go ahead and take our bread out of our banneton, and we can just drop that over. Remember, this is the bottom. We don't want to do anything else to this. We want to kind of just drop it over into it, because the top, where we've got that right nice round shape on it, is where we're going to put our cuttings on it. So we're just going to put this onto our parchment paper just like that. And we don't want to mess with this. We just want to kind of leave it alone. And now we're going to take our bread lawn, and be really careful with that. If you haven't seen the video on how to use one of these, I'll put that link in that description box below. You can go check that video out on how to use this. So now we're going to take some of our rice flour. And if you've ever seen the sourdough breads that you get in the store, they've got kind of that nice white markings on the top of them where they've done some cuttings, and they've got the little white where it's baked it through. That's probably either the rice flour or regular flour. The rice flour itself, again, is what we used in it earlier, because it helps it release from our banneton a little bit easier. So you can use either one that you want at this point. I like the rice flour on the top because I like that color that it's going to give. The flour itself, the regular flour, will darken it up a little bit more. So definitely, if you want to put this on there, you can. If you don't, you don't have to. So now this is up to the creativity of how you want to do it. If you've seen the video that I put in there the other day where I cooked some bread in the Le Creuset versus my Emile Henry, I had a couple of designs that I did on the top of the bread. So let's just kind of cut these up across the top, and you definitely want to do this. If you don't do this, the bread, when you put it in your Dutch oven, won't have a way to vent. And so the steam that's going to come out of it could pop out the side, it could pop out the bottom, and you don't want that. You want really nice, pretty bread. So we're just going to take our bread lawn here, and we're just going to make several cuts on the side. And I might put some here on the sides, just a few little X's. Just however you want to do it, let your creativity run wild with that. And then we'll put some on the top. All right, so now that I've got my markings on my bread, I'm going to go grab my Dutch oven, and we're going to get this into the oven and get it baked. All right, I've got my Dutch oven now out of the oven. We're going to get this go. Make sure you wear your gloves when you do that, and be really careful when you put your bread in that you don't burn yourself. Now you can cut these little edges off the top if you want to. Put your lid back on it. It goes back into that 450 degree oven for 20 minutes. After 20 minutes, you'll take the lid off of it, and we're going to cook it for another 10 or 15 minutes to get it brown. So stick with me and we'll look at this and see how this turns out. All right, I am back and I've got my first loaf out of the oven. I put my Dutch oven back in the oven because I want to go ahead and start working on my second one, but I wanted to show you what this looked like. So this is what my first loaf comes out looks like. You want to hear that nice thump, which is what we're looking for. We've got a nice crust on the outside. And again, that was 20 minutes on 450 in my oven with the lid on it. Then I took the lid off and I cooked it for 10 minutes. If you want it a little bit darker, you definitely can leave it in there longer. I kind of like this color where it is right here, so I'm going to leave this the way it is. So if you want it darker, definitely leave it in there a little bit longer. The way you can tell too is you can take a temperature probe like this and stick it down inside the bread. And if the temperature comes back between 200 and 205 degrees Fahrenheit, then you'll know that your bread is done. So you do not want to cut this now. You want to let this cool completely down. I know that it's going to be hard to do. It's going to be irresistible to go ahead and want to try to cut this, but trust me, if you cut it now, your bread will dry. Unless you're planning on eating the whole thing at one sitting or you're going to carve it up for dinner, then go ahead and cut it up now while it's warm. Put you some nice butter on it and then go ahead and enjoy it. But if you're just going to cut off a slice of it, what'll happen is the steam will come out of it that's inside of it, and what it does is it will dry it out. And we don't want that. So just leave it alone, let it do its thing, let it come down to room temperature, put it on a rack. I've got it on a rack here on this, and we're just gonna let this cool down. I'm gonna go ahead and work on my next one here with my bread lamb and get it ready to go back into the oven. So stick with me, we'll come back after these have cooled down and we'll give these a taste test. I am back and my bread has cooled down now, so let's give this a taste test. This smells really good. We've got that nice hollow thump, what we're looking for on that. And I've got some of my homemade butter. If you've never made butter before, I'll put the link in the description box below. You can check that out on how that is made. It is really easy to make. All right, so let's take our bread here. I've got 2 loaves. Again, this recipe made 2 loaves. And let's cut a little bit of this off and see what this looks like. Now that we've got the edge of it cut off, we can see what the inside looks like on that. That looks like we've got some nice bread. We've got that sourdough smell to it, which is really nice. And you can see here on the side, we've got some nice firmness on that. So we've got a really good loaf of bread here. I'm going to take some of my butter and we're going to put some of that on this bread and give it a try. That is absolutely delicious. It's got that little bit of that tangy taste that you get when you get your sourdough. Sourdough is just a little bit on a higher level than if you use the yeast. The artisan breads are really good too, but the sourdough bread, it just takes it to another level. I hope you like this content. I would love to hear from you if you make this loaf, how yours turns out. And if you have any questions on any of the process, feel free to leave me a comment or question in the comment section. I would love to hear from you. And if you like this content, maybe you might consider giving me a thumbs up. I would really appreciate it. And check out one of these other 2 videos over here on the side. You might find something else you like. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Leave me a comment. I can't wait to hear from you. I'll see you in my next video. Bye-bye now. It's a winner.